So we're looking at this program, which is a bubble sort, and we're going to follow it through in this Python tutor. And that's really useful, that lets you visualize the program. So if we go back to line 1, we've got our items is an array with these 5 values. And as we cycle through the code, it will show you the value of the variables. So by the time we've got to this point, these are our items in the array. N holds the value of 4 because N is the length of the items, which is 5. But here in line 6, it's been set to N equals N minus 1. Swapped has been changed to false, and the index is at 0 because the for loop resets index to be 0. And now we're looking at this if statement. So the if statement says if item of index of item 0 is greater than item at index plus 1. So is F greater than G? It's not. So that if statement doesn't run. So it swaps, it comes back out of the for loop. Sorry, the if statement ends. That's not true. So it will go back to line 7, which is what it's done. So now index has gone up to 1. So now we're looking at the G of Georgia. Is Georgia greater than Delaware? Why are we looking at Delaware? Because the index is 2, index plus 1. So this time it is true. So if I go next, so now we've set the temp variable to items index. So index is currently 1, so Georgia is going to be put into temp. There you go, Georgia's been put into temp. What's happening in line 10? See if you can predict what's happening in line 10. So line 10 was assignment, and we're putting a value into the array at the index of 1. So we're replacing Georgia with the line above. So Delaware should go into 1. Let's see. So Delaware's gone into 1. And if it did line 11, index plus 1 should be temp. So Georgia was put in there. So it's kind of swapped those two. So Delaware and Georgia have swapped. So now we go back. Index has gone up to 2. So now we're comparing index 2 and 3. And we can see that index 2 holds a G, index 3 holds an A. So it's going to swap again. So the temp is going to hold Georgia. Now we're going to put Alabama into index. And then the temp value is going to be put into index 3. So now it's swapped them. So they're now in order. But we can see that the A isn't at the start yet. So we're going to have to repeat this process again. So we're now looking at index being 4. So an index N equals 4. We're now saying we're not saying index equaling 4. We're saying index is equaling 3. I had to stop and think there for a minute. Index is only at 3. When N equals 4, we've got too far. We've finished the array. So now we're looking at the third and fourth. So we're comparing a G to a C. So it's going to want to swap again. So it goes through the system. The contents at the index value, the array index, in this case 3, Georgia is put into temp. Line 10 is going to put California in index 4 down into index 3. And temp is going to be stored into the index index plus 1. Okay, so now N is 3. So now let's think what we're doing now. So what we have to do is just watch carefully how this debugger is going to work, because there are limitations with this. So our N value has been 4 because of line 6. And so far we've stayed within this for loop. Okay. and we are currently looking at index 3, so we've almost done the full cycle. So G is greater than C. Temp currently holds Georgia, so line 9 has been actioned, so we know we're on line 9. So if we go to the next line, so now the index value is going to hold the item index plus 1. So California is going to be put into item 3. Index is holding 3, and index plus 1 value is going to be put into index. So when I press next, California is going into item 3. Now if you notice, N has now dropped to the value 3. It didn't show that we went outside this loop, but we must have done, because the only line of code that changes the value of N is line 6. So we've gone outside the for loop now, because once we get to this part, and also notice, look what's happened to swap. Swap has changed to false, whereas swapped was only made false because of line 5. So this for loop stopped once we had N being 4. So once we got to the value of N, once we incremented through the loop and we'd completed it that many times, we now went back to line 4. We set swap to false, and now we're working on N equals N minus 1. So now we're working on a lower level of the array. So we're starting with 0 again, but this time we're only going up to N equals 3. We've bubbled the top value. We've bubbled the G to the top. So now when we go through this array, we should get the F to be at position 3. Let's see what happens. So let's go next. So we are looking at index 0. Index 0 is Florida. And we're comparing index with index plus 1. So F is higher than D. So if line 9 runs, temp should hold Florida. Let's see. And it does. So temp now holds Florida. So line 10 will now put Delaware into subscript 0, into index 0. And it's done it. Now swap set equal to true. We're still within the for loop. Index is now incremented up to 1. So now we're working on index 1. If index 1 is greater than index plus 1, is F greater than A? Yes, it is. So it's going to swap again. What's the first thing it's going to do? It's going to put index into temp. So index 1 is Florida. Florida's gone into temp. What's the next thing it's going to do? It's going to put Alabama, index plus 1, into index. So Alabama is going to go into box number 1. Or maybe now. There. Now Alabama's gone into box number 1. Swapped still happened. We've still done a swap. We're still within this for loop because we haven't reached the end yet. Now we're on N equals 3. We're on index 2. So we're looking at index 2 compared to 3. Is F greater than C? Yes, it is greater than C. So we're going to move forward again. So temp is going to hold Florida. It does. Then we're going to swap California and Florida. California is going to go into item 2. Yep. And now we've gone down. We've gone back out of the loop because N got to 3. Look at swap. Swap's gone back to false. We've gone right back here. N's gone down to level 2. So now we're looking at this loop again, starting at 0, but this time N's going to hold a value of 2. So index has gone to 0. So now we're comparing Delaware with Alabama. So temp will hold Delaware. Delaware and Alabama will move into item 0. Now we're going to move up and compare Delaware and California. Temp's going to hold item 1 is Delaware. It already does hold Delaware. So now we're going to put California into index 1. California's gone there. Now we're going to next. So now it's taken us back out of the loop, and now it's taken us back here. So if you look, this is now in order. This loop, while loop, is running while n is greater than 0, n is greater than 0, but swapped is false. So this loop will not run now. Done. And the last thing it should do is print the items. So if we run, there we are, look, there's our output. It's printed the items.